The first afternoon in Nairobi, we spent walking around the downtown area. We saw the convention center, then a mausoleum with mats to sit or lie on, next the Supreme High Court, Parliament Building, and the City Hall. We visited the market with its stalls of local crafts. This old man was likely looking for food. The local people probably thought we were nuts when they saw us down on the street taking this picture of this 3-inch grasshopper. Our party of 18 people traveled in 3 Volkswagen vans for the 2 weeks that we were in Kenya. This was our group, with our driver second on the right. Ed was one of our gang. He is a music teacher in Hamilton. One of the highlights of our trip was a visit to Mayor's Ranch to see a Maasai Manyatta. We watched a display of traditional Maasai dancing, high jumping, and stick throwing. They were colorfully decorated, even their legs. After the demonstration, the women displayed their work, which was for sale. These children were standing outside their home. The one child has a gourd for a bottle. The old woman is sitting in front of her home, which the women made of sticks, mud, and cow dung. Although the people couldn't speak English, they were friendly. Some of them had large holes in their ears. They were a happy, gentle people. This grandmother was babysitting. The men were so different with their elaborate headdress. We weren't sure what these clubs were for. They colored their heads with the red clay soil. These spears were for sale, but they were a little too long for our suitcase. 3 of the young men posed for the tourists. You can see a local bus crossing the bridge over Chania Falls. This boy is showing us the coffee beans from the plant behind him. The leaves of the sisal plants were pounded to make ropes for mats. It was an experience to see the colorful local market and people. We stopped at these roadside stalls where the men sold their beautiful work. We stayed at the Ark one night. While there, we saw these red-billed hornbills. In the underground viewing room, we spent quite a while watching the Cape buffalo as they came to sample the salt lick at the waterhole. A family of giant forest hogs stayed for a short time. They can weigh 400 pounds or more. As we drove along the main road, we saw local people buying clothes. This is a shopping mall. While waiting for gas at $4.35 a gallon, these women walked by. At the entrance to Samburu Game Reserve, these huts were home for the park wardens. The Riverview Lodge in Samburu was a very pretty place. They had their own fire department. Bougainvillea blossoms were growing by our cabin. and also the passion flower vine. We saw the weaver bird's nests in an acacia tree. The weaver holds down a grass strand with its foot while weaving the other end with its beak. As many as 300 threads of grass go into the house. The desert rose bush was in bloom. Tourists had to be wary of crocodiles by the river. The marabou storks would open their wings when the sun shone. While on the game run, we saw steinbok standing on their hind legs to reach the leaves, and a 6-foot lizard at the side of the road. Reticulated giraffe were seen fairly often. The males use their horns to spar with rival bulls. The buffalo weavers were pretty. This is called a go-away bird. We really enjoyed seeing the secretary bird, grouse, gray neck-crowned crane, Egyptian eagle, ostrich, and saddle-billed stork. It was a thrill seeing oryx. They can go weeks or even months without a drink, deriving moisture from plants. And impala, olive baboons, and waterbuck. From our van, we saw local houses. We had a short stop to buy souvenirs. Mount Kenya Lodge, situated on the foothills of Mount Kenya, was a very exclusive place. Anyone wishing to visit, even for a meal, had to pay $10 to join the club. From our balcony, we saw part of the mountain. We were glad to have the fire they lit in our bedroom in the late afternoon. This heron and peacock were on the grounds. The Chukka dancers were very colorful. During the game run in the Masai Mara Game Reserve, we saw some topi and a cheetah, fastest of all land mammals, and her 3 young ones. The tourists had lots to choose from here. We stopped to stretch our legs after a long, bumpy ride on our way to Fig Tree Camp. Fig Tree Camp was quite a change of accommodation. It provided you with all the comforts of a hotel, yet retained all the excitement of sleeping out in the real Africa. Our excellent dinners were served by candlelight. The water was heated in a drum, which was over a fire. The night we stayed there, it rained, so there was no hot water, since the rain put the fire out. 2 of our group caught up on their notes at the slab table. Men did all the work at the camp. It was comfortable in our tent, except during the night when there were no lights, since the generator was shut off. From the van we looked at the shops and saw our first and last African train. This family was buying gas while we were waiting to fill our gas tank. The hippo wallow in the river all day, emerging nightly to forage for grass. Our driver had to slow down to pass the migration of wildebeests. The vultures were cleaning a carcass. It was interesting to see how compatible the impala and waterbuck were. The highlight of the game run was seeing the lions. A lion is capable of consuming 75 pounds of meat a day, but may not eat again for several days. They may rest and doze 20 hours out of 24. See how well this male hides in the grass. It was quite unusual to see a black-backed jackal. The warthogs are kneeling to rout out grubs. These were the only wild donkeys we saw. The black rhino needs several square miles to supply its food requirements. We often saw Thompson's gazelles. They can run 45 miles per hour. These women are making their daily trip for water. A few Maasai women agreed to pose for us to take pictures, for a fee. A brother and sister posed for us also. The different formations of termite hills always fascinated us. The elephant is throwing dust to plug pores to get rid of bugs. The zebra and hartebeest get along well together. Some experts believe that the stripes may help moderate the zebra's body temperature in the scorching African sun, the black streaks absorbing the heat and the white areas reflecting it. We wished we could go inside these stores where the locals shop. We could see that they had dirt floors and no electricity. One day we were on a game run, and I saw something above the clouds. It was Mount Kilimanjaro, Africa's highest mountain, at 19,340 feet high. Amboseli Serena Lodge was one of our favorite lodges. It was like an oasis. The weaver birds were waiting for breadcrumbs from the dining room. Gourds conceal the lights and make a fascinating ceiling decoration. There were many superb starlings in the trees near the lodge. The black-faced vervets were quite tame. Two Maasai men said they would pose for us for a fee. Amboseli National Park covers an area of 1,259 square miles. It was the dustiest park. It was unusual to see these 3 elephants climbing among the rocks on the hills. The hills of Tsavo National Park provided a beautiful setting for Ngulia Lodge. Papaya fruit tree was beside the lodge. Notice the broom this man is holding. There are a great variety of succulent plants in Africa. It was common to see lizards scurrying about. Sometimes on a game run we saw the Maasai giraffe. And occasionally a tiny dik-dik. It is a 15-inch high antelope weighing less than 10 pounds. It was exciting to see this cheetah sitting on a termite hill, calling her young. It sounded like a bird calling. We had lunch at the Taita Hills Lodge. The tulip tree was in blossom. Salt Lick Lodge is a complex of towers, roofed in typical African thatch and perched atop stilts, with interconnecting bridge-like walkways. There was mosquito netting in our bedroom, but there was no need for it while we were there. There was an underground viewing room near the natural salt lick and waterhole, and we saw these waterbuck there. One of our drivers posed beside a termite hill. When we stopped at the side of the road, a monkey came to have a closer look. During a stop for gas, we had a chance to look inside one of the better local stores. At the front of the store was this wooden statue of a Maasai. The baobab trees didn't have leaves since it was winter in Kenya. The local bus had stopped because of a flat tire. Back in the van we passed homes like this and a hotel. We bought an ebony carving from John and David, who were of the Komba tribe. While flying over Egypt, we could see the Nile River and desert. From our hotel we saw the Great Pyramid and Khephrun's Pyramid, with its original limestone cap still in place. You could take a camel ride to the base of the pyramid. Some of the pyramid blocks were huge. This is the stonework above the original entrance. The 153-foot-long narrow passageway, called the Grand Gallery, pierces the limestone core of the Great Pyramid. This is the view from partway up the pyramid. The Sphinx is a great figure that guards the approach to the Pyramid of Khafra, the smallest tomb at Giza. The Sound and Light Spectacular is a historical dramatization held on the desert. The City of the Dead is a medieval cemetery at Cairo's eastern limits. They are lifelike homes for the dead. Many of the one-story tombs are occupied by squatters who cannot find other homes in overcrowded Cairo. In spite of the absence of such basic services as water and drainage, some areas of the cemeteries have well-established communities with their own shops and cafes. From our hotel balcony, we saw this woman running to catch a bus. It was not uncommon to see soldiers patrolling the streets. When we looked out of our hotel window, we saw this courtyard and home. We also saw an apartment building under construction. While driving on the tour bus, we saw this mosque and a local electrical store. At a main intersection, the traffic cop was directing traffic from his stand. This is a street in the outskirts of Cairo. And the boats on the Nile River. At the west bank of the Nile, we went to the Valley of Kings and saw King Tut's tomb, where cameras were not allowed. Our tour guide explained the arrangement of different tombs, so constructed to fool tomb robbers. We visited Ramses VI tomb and were very impressed with the interior. We saw a number of tombs in the Valley of Kings area. This is the entrance to the tomb of King Amenophis II and the interior. In designing the lavish terraced temple of Deir el-Bahari, they took full advantage of the natural drama of the site. It is Hatshepsut's temple, a monument to a remarkable woman king. The temple guard was very relaxed. This is the temple of Ramesses II. We wished we had time to explore the area behind the temple. In spite of the heat, Queen Nefertari's tomb was well worth seeing. We saw this mummy of a 6-month-old fetus. In a small village near Luxor, we watched a man making a clay pot. It was hard to believe that these are living quarters for local people. We walked in 115 to 120 degree heat and found these side streets most interesting in spite of the dust and flies. Galabia is the name of the gowns worn by men in Egypt. These men were shooting crap beside the Temple of Karnak. An ancient burial tomb by the Nile River was unusual. The Nile near our hotel was lined with feluccas for hire. The 16th century BC Karnak Temple and area covers 40 acres. The date palm tree was new to us. Ramesses the Great is shown here with his wife, Nefertari, standing between his knees. The hypostyle hall has 16 pillars that are 12 feet in diameter and rise 79 feet above the temple floor. Reliefs depicting kings and gods ring the columns. This is one of the 17 obelisks in the world. It is to honor Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh. The sacred scarab, or dung beetle, rolls its egg up in a ball of dung, on which the hatched young feeds. In Egyptian mythology, the ball became a symbol of the sun, source of life, and the scarab, the force which propelled it in the sky. The avenue of ram-headed sphinxes connected the two temples of Luxor and Karnak. One temple was for Ramesses, and the other for his wife. The head of Ramesses was on the ground at Luxor Temple. The first court of the Temple of Luxor shows the seated statue of Ramses the Great, who was responsible for much of the building. This is Ramesses II. He is wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. The seated figures are King Tut and his wife. These are papyrus columns and Greek columns. We stayed at the Etap Hotel in Luxor. During our stay in Aswan, we traveled by felucca to visit a Nubian village. The Nubian people date back to 4000 BC. The village we saw had a courtyard with a well. The hostess was very friendly. One of the bedrooms of her home had a canopy bed. Another was for hens and goats. The grandparents, children, and grandchildren lived in this home and ate in the courtyard. 3,500 years ago, this huge obelisk was partly cut from red granite, but a flaw was noticed during the work, so it was abandoned. Had this fault not occurred, it would have been the largest single stone monument in the world, measuring 138 feet long, 14 feet square at the base, and weighing 1,168 tons. In Aswan, our group stayed at the Oberoi Hotel on Elephantine Island. A sensitive plant was on the hotel grounds. One afternoon we climbed the stairs to the observation deck at the hotel, and this was our view. While sailing on the Nile, we saw a museum, a lighthouse, and a small village. We stopped at the 100-year-old botanical gardens. These camels were waiting to take us to Aga Khan's tomb. He died in 1957 and is buried in this mausoleum built of sandstone with granite floors and columns. The doors are bronze and the coffin is Italian marble. You must remove your shoes before entering and may not speak or take pictures while inside. Temple attendant stayed in this underground house. Aga Khan's wife is still living in this home near her husband's tomb. The Nileometer was used to record the height of the flooded Nile River. The taxation was governed by this measurement. The higher the river, the higher the taxes. We now fly from Aswan to Abu Simbel. The 19th dynasty pharaoh Ramesses II erected huge buildings throughout Egypt, but his grandest memorials are two vast temples cut into the sandstone cliffs at Abu Simbel. The temples were moved to this new site 200 feet above the old before the new high dam at Aswan flooded the area. These are three of the surviving gigantic statues of Ramesses on the face of his temple. Nefertari is shown here beside Ramesses. This carving is of Horus, the ancient Egyptian god of the sun. These statues of Ramesses stand in the great hall of the temple. This relief enacts a bloody ceremony of ancient origin, requiring the king to sacrifice foes to Amun, the god of life. Sitting firmly in the chariot is Ramesses, crushing the rebellious upon the mountains. Nefertari's smaller temple complements the great temple of Ramesses. Each image of the queen is flanked by two of Ramesses. Nefertari wears the cow horns and solar disk of Hathor, goddess of love, happiness, dance, and music. The huge head of Hathor dominates the 6 pillars. On the trip home we saw this view of Egypt and the snow-capped Alps.